survived for almost 50 years, and beginning since 1959. And this newspaper obviously is the voice of the independence movement in the Puerto Rican nation for that long. Tonight, Carmelo is going to speak about the subject of biotechnology and the role that Puerto Rico plays in the development of biotechnology. As you know, this week there's a whole conference, but to see the diversity of our work today, some of us participated in obviously giving the welcome to the governor of Puerto Rico here, and obviously his administration is one that's involved in biotechnology. However, for us here in the diaspora, it also speaks to the fact that for the first time since 1948, the Puerto Rican office, the government office of Puerto Rico, is now in the heart of the Puerto Rican community. He came to dedicate that office. So it was in that spirit and in that context that we obviously gave him the welcome. And he was here with the governor of Illinois, and this morning. Tonight, we are hosting this event because we found out that Carmelo was going to be here. We've known Carmelo in terms of his work for many, many years. And his book is on sale. This book obviously focuses on the issue of biotechnology, the issue of biotechnology vis-a-vis the changing of foods and food production, and what that means to the world, what it means obviously to Puerto Rico and Latin America, and biotechnology and globalization. So I am really honored to present to you Carmelo, and I'm sure you're going to have a wonderful, wonderful charla with Carmelo.
It's available in Spanish only, although the author's in the process of translating it. But we encourage you. There are only 4 copies left here, so snap it up.
What's the price?
$17.
$17. Yeah. And also there is a summary in English available in the Oakland Institute website, and that was posted less than a week ago. So anyway, thank you very much to everybody, to Alejandro, and to all of you for this opportunity. I was writing for the Claridad newspaper for the last, actually for 13 years total. And I also lived in the state of Vermont for a number of years, where I was doing my master's in social ecology. And that's when I began to get really concerned about the impacts on biotechnology. Chicago is the host for the biggest gathering of biotechnology industry people in the world. It takes place every year. BIO, Biotechnology Industry Organization, they're meeting in Chicago this week, so the press is just doing a whole propaganda campaign in favor of these industries. The BIO gathers together pharmaceutical corporations, agricultural biotechnology companies, and makers of biological weapons. Well, they call them biodefense, but really it's biological weapons. Even a nuclear missile now is called defense, but biodefense means really the U.S. making biological weapons. And anyway, when I was in Vermont, I hosted a radio show, and that was when the subject of biotechnology really began to get hot. The makers of these products say that they're going to create cures for cancer, they're going to feed the hungry, and blah, blah, blah. You know, that's the thing industry usually goes on about. You know, their great intentions, and how could you be against this technology? We're helping the poor, and we're saving you guys. So one thing I did when I came back to Puerto Rico and joined the staff of Claridad was to start on a series of articles, which went on for years and years and years until this baby came about, on the different aspects of biotechnology. For example, what are the effects of biotechnology products on human health? Toxicity, allergies. What are their effects on the environment? How does this affect the sovereignty of nations, especially the poor nations? What are the geopolitical, military, ethical, agroecological aspects? You know, the whole thing, you know, every single aspect of agricultural biotechnology. And this is what I aim to do in my book, Transgenic Value. Be able to answer to every reader who never heard of any of these things, what is the deal with genetically modified organisms or GMOs, also known as GE, which stands for not General Electric, but genetic engineering. I'm going to give you a few quick facts. First of all, genetically engineered organism, in Spanish is transgénico. It's basically an organism that has had its DNA hotwired, sabotaged, so to speak, and had inserted in it genes from another species. For example, we already have fish genes introduced into the tomato. We've had bacteria genes introduced into corn, and human genes introduced into rice and tobacco. So it's a little bit like an orgy, you know, an indiscriminated exchange of genetic material across species, you know, crossing trees with fish, bacteria with humans, and back and forth. This is precisely, you know, I think it's a form of postmodern ecology, you know, basically tailor-made organisms. And anyway, we're eating them already. There were no public hearings. There was no environmental impact statement. It wasn't announced on the press. Nobody told anybody anything. This was in 1996. And everybody asked me, you know, in Puerto Rico, what are the GMO foods? That's pretty easy. There's just 4. Corn, soy, canola, and cotton. Those are the 4 major cash crops that have been genetically engineered. Not fruit or vegetables yet, but the companies want to push on us genetically engineered wheat, fruit, trees, fish, lawns, and just about everything. But so far, those are the big cash crops that have been altered. And okay, 80%, more or less 80% of the soy grown in this country is already genetically engineered. Almost half of the corn, I would say maybe 3/4 of all cotton, and canola we don't know, but it's also a pretty high percentage. Much of this is fed to animals, but we eat those animals. Anyway, their dairy, their meat, we are indirectly exposed. Even if you say, oh, well, I don't eat soy, that's not my problem. Soy is used as an additive in bread, in chocolate, mayonnaise, in just about everything. And corn is also used as a sweetener. For example, in Coca-Cola, and just about anything. Sugar cane is not king anymore. Now it's corn syrup, which is also very fattening. And anyway, these products, don't ask me where are they. They're not labeled. There's no way to do a boycott. There's nothing that we can do as consumers, because if we don't know where they are, we cannot boycott them. That's not a coincidence. The industry has spent substantial amounts of money and energy and pressure and strong arming to all governments everywhere to keep these products from ever being labeled. They are labeled in Europe, and the industry is very angry about it, because consumer polls show that labeling a product as genetically engineered, you might as well put a skull and crossbones on it. People don't want it. People don't want to eat genetically engineered foods. I've never seen a picket in favor of them. I've never seen civil disobedience for GMOs or any petitions or anything. It's always against. Unlike organic farming, where the products are labeled, and they have to be labeled, you know, as organic, because that's how the farmer gets his premium. The biotechnology industry is basing itself on the ignorance of the consumer. Only, how do you say, a pueblo, people who don't know about these products would ever buy them. So they call themselves the knowledge economy, but they're really dependent on our ignorance. And in Puerto Rico, well, nobody knows anything about this. Much of the experimentation on genetically engineered crops is being taken to Puerto Rico. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's on the USDA website. They have something called Biotech Regulatory Services, and there's a list of all the experiments. They're not done in greenhouses or in laboratories, but in the open air. And Puerto Rico has had over 3,440, more than California. California is 40 times bigger than Puerto Rico. It has a much bigger agricultural industry. So there is an intentional policy of outsourcing, downloading all of this experimentation. Perhaps even contraceptive corn is being tested there. I don't know anything about it. And anyway, also the government in Puerto Rico is pushing this very strongly. Governor Aníbal Acevedo Vilá calls it the knowledge economy, which if you look at his project, his economic project, he's talking about introducing agricultural biotechnology, pharmaceuticals, nanotechnology, high-tech manufacturing to Puerto Rico without any thought for all the environmental consequences and how this is going to impact us. Much of these genetically engineered crops, the commercial ones, are used in Puerto Rico as crop seed. Basically, Puerto Rico is a sort of breadbasket for the U.S. because a lot of the seed grown in the U.S., rice, corn, and soy, actually comes from southern Puerto Rico, where it is basically harvested and then used as seed. Much of the rice in California is actually Puerto Rican seed from a few farms in Lajas, owned by the Rice Tech Corporation. There's lots and lots of acres, but none of it is to be eaten. It is to be used as seed in California, which then returns in Puerto Rico as bags of rice labeled made in the USA. So it's kind of like colonialism, you know. You supply raw matter really cheap and then get really expensive processed products in return with no acknowledgement to your contribution. And on top of that, we get the experiments too. I have to say that as far as I know, all political parties are supporting this knowledge economy project. Somebody who's supposed to be in the opposition, Jose Garriga Pico, a former independentista who's now a stateholder and a senator, presented a bill supporting Aníbal Acevedo Vila's project. They're supposed to be enemies, but when both colonial parties speak with one voice, you know, that's the ruling class talking. They can have all sorts of stupid little fights over idiotic things, but when it comes to their habichuelas, their income, they walk in lockstep like an army. They close ranks and they know what their interests are. So when I saw, you know, both Populares and PNP supporting this together, I said, this is really big. This is big. Anyway, I went to San Germán to a symposium in 2002 on biotechnology by the Agricultural Extension Service. It was more like a pro-industry seminar. They were looking for somebody to present the other side of the coin, meaning me. So they finally learned that I existed, and they told me, Carmelo, you have to come over. This is all pro-industry, and you know we need a different perspective, because if not, it's pure pamphleto, you know, propaganda. So I came over. The audience was agribusinessmen, you know, not Puerto Rican campesinos, but businessmen who pay somebody else to toil the land. Basically, agribusiness type of farming, and the speakers were basically business people and academicos masquerading, no, business people masquerading as academicos and scientists, telling the audience, the target audience, about the joys and wonders of biotechnology. And anyway, you have to understand the market for these crops, the market is farmers. This product is sold to farmers, not to us. The industry wouldn't care any less whether we like it or not. It's farmers that they want to win over. And anyway, the party pooper, I mean me, came over and gave my talk about all the dangers, toxic dangers inherent to GMO crops and the liabilities, which I will tell you about now. When I finished, you know, you could hear a dog 2 towns away barking. Nobody was saying anything. Questions and answers, and everybody was like, because I brought up a lot of stuff that the speakers never told them about. Anyway, one of the other speakers said that all of these activities being brought to Puerto Rico because Puerto Rico has a good political climate. Wow. Whatever the hell that means. And anyway, one of my purposes is to change that climate somewhat. And anyway, so what are the dangers? I'm going to be brief about this. I elaborate on this in my book, my bilingual webpage, Proyecto de Bioseguridad. Are these things dangerous or not? Well, last year, a British newspaper, that was back in May, The Independent reported, oh, let me tell you one more thing. This whole business, you know, there are people who are concerned that biotechnology will be taken over by a few corporations. So those fears are unfounded because one corporation owns 90% of the business. Called Mondialo. I'm sorry, Monsanto. That's what I They have 90% of the business. The remaining 10 or 11% is DuPont from Europe, Aventis and Syngenta, Dow, and well, that's it. That's the whole business. That's a free market at work. So anyway, this paper reported that Monsanto has a secret study, a lab rat feeding study that was 13 weeks long, in which it showed that one of their genetically engineered corns, called MON 863, actually had a severe effect on the health of rats, including abnormal cell counts, which could indicate infection, cancer, or poisoning, necrosis in the liver cells, and symptoms that could suggest anemia or diabetes or both. So anyway, we know this because somebody, some anonymous hero with access to Monsanto's documents, brought this to the press at a great risk. Monsanto said that, well, yeah, there is such a report, and they gave us a 11-page summary. Because the report is, 1,136 pages long. That's not exactly light reading. It's more like a doorstop or something. But anyway, they finally released it when a German court forced them to do so. And that's how we have this information. The joke is on us because that corn was approved for commercial use and we're eating it already. Monsanto knowingly fed this to us and then kept the information secret. They did the same thing with Agent Orange. Even today, they're still denying that Agent Orange has anything to do with what happened to the veterans and the Vietnamese. And as a matter of fact, Monsanto is facing criminal charges of cover-up on the Agent Orange case. Monsanto also admitted to bribing over 100 Indonesian officials and paid a small fine, after having been found guilty. It's only 100 officials, it's just an oversight. So anyway, why were these crops genetically altered? What is the deal? This wasn't done to feed the hungry. I mean, the hungry don't have money, so they're not a part in this except for public relations purposes. Most of these crops were genetically engineered to be resistant to herbicides. And as you know, when you have a really, really big farm, weeds are a headache. And the lazy people, instead of bending over and doing the work with the machete, it's easier to just get a drum of Roundup and start spraying everything. And basically all of these crops, soy and canola, were engineered to be resistant to one brand of herbicide. So the biology was hotwired to make the world safe for one product. That's how it's done. So anyway, now you can buy all the Roundup you want and your harvest won't be harmed. Any organism that didn't come out of the Monsanto laboratory will be destroyed. And anyway, the president of the Puerto Rico Farm Bureau told me that Roundup is relatively benign. So I looked it up, and there is data that Roundup is an endocrine disruptor. It is linked to neurological disorders. It increases the risk of miscarriage, even in late pregnancies, and it's extremely toxic to wildlife. It persists in the soil maybe for a whole year.
Wow.
And they're using it in school districts, in government buildings, in hospital lawns,
They sell
golf
it at
courses.
Home Depot.
Huh?
They sell that at Home Depot as a herbicide for your garden.
Yeah, just like as if it were
Como
soda,
si fuera así.
Yeah, we've got a whole continent drenched in Roundup, thanks to genetic engineering. Anyway, the other crops, corn and cotton, were altered to make them resistant to insects, which means that they are, the corn cob is a pesticide. And anyway, that product, the BT, it's called BT. The BT crops are based on 3 assumptions. One is that this won't harm people. Wildlife will not be affected, and the pests will not develop resistance. All 3 are false. There's already documentation in the medical literature of farm workers who are exposed to corn dust. And they are developing severe allergies that are specific to the insecticidal toxin in this corn. And about non-target species, you see the military terminology here, non-target species, meaning butterflies or bees or beneficial organisms, they are killed by the BT toxin. Because the plant, the whole corn stalk is a pesticide, and it's oozing this toxin all over the place. It's killing bees, butterflies, and all kinds of wildlife. And number 3, we were told that las plagas, the pests, would not develop resistance. They already did. In India, for example, BT cotton was introduced, and there was a massive wave of farmer suicides because the crop didn't work. You see, the seed was much more expensive than normal cotton. They were told that they would not have to use pesticide. So yes, indeed, the seed was more expensive. They had to use pesticide all the same, and they went bankrupt. And many farmers in India committed suicide by drinking the pesticide that they got themselves in debt by purchasing. And the leading cause of suicide among Midwest American farmers, leading cause of death is suicide. So this technology is literally killing farmers. And anyway, we have other, what other cases can I tell you about? There was a case, we know that there are problems with this technology as far back as 1998, when experiments were done in the Rowett Research Institute in Scotland with rats that were fed an experimental pesticidal potato. And again, the results were extremely worrying. There was a slander campaign against the scientists, Arpad Putzai, a horrible slander campaign. Even today, many scientists believe that he was discredited, and it's a product of the corporate PR campaign. As soon as he came out with these bad results, the logs to his lab were changed, he was denied access to his papers, he was fired and submitted to an audit. And you only do audits when you believe that fraud was committed. But anyway, we also had reports in the British press that Monsanto called Bill Clinton, who called Tony Blair, who called the head of the laboratory, telling him to tell that guy to shut up. Make him shut up by whatever means possible. But anyway, his study was peer-reviewed and is part of the scientific literature, and he was vindicated beyond all doubt. Now, none of this would be so bad if it weren't for what I'm about to tell you now. This wasn't so bad. I'm getting to the meat. These products reproduce. They're not cell phones. They're not computers. They're not can openers or cars, which you can return and have a recall. There is no recall with genetically engineered organisms because they'll keep reproducing. And anyway, as late as 2002, I had industry people, for example, from Dow, telling me that, you know, this is all under control. GMOs will not appear where they're not supposed to be. Federal regulations are very strict, and we have a very accurate inventory. Okay. But anyway, maybe the guy speaking to me didn't read much, because as early as the year 2000, a group of environmentalists in DC decided to take supermarket products and test them, send them to a laboratory in Nebraska called Genetic ID, whose specialty is breaking down DNA to find weird genes in our food. And the product they chose was the Taco Bell shells that are sold in Safeway. So the results came, and it said, yes, this is testing positive for genetically engineered corn, and it's a particular variety that is unfit for human consumption, according to the US government. This is called Starlink, which was a variety of BT corn which didn't do too well in the FDA toxicity tests. And those tests are really bad. I mean, if your food flunks an FDA test, it has to be really, really, really bad. So anyway, it was banned for human consumption, but they approved it to feed cattle. You know, and the inevitable happened. You know, the corn began to get mixed up with other types of corn in the silos, in the elevators, in the trucks, maybe pollination. And anyway, hundreds of consumer products turned out to be contaminated. 430 million bushels of corn had to be decommissioned. They were probably sent to Africa free as a gift. They usually do that. And anyway, that's one reason why Europe and Japan and many other countries are really not buying corn from the US anymore. And even today, that was 6 years ago, even today, Starlink corn keeps popping up. For example, a few months ago, Japan turned around an American shipment of corn because it tested positive for Starlink. My theory is that the foundational seed used by agronomists, from which they make the elite varieties of seed, which are then bought by farmers, those foundational seeds are polluted, which means that every time they propagate seed, the Starlink genes go right back into our food supply. Anyway, in the year 2001, it got even worse because we got an article in Nature magazine reporting that genetically engineered corn is already in Mexico, spreading aggressively and pushing out local varieties. And the authors, Ignacio Chapel and David Quiz, warned that this could have catastrophic consequences for our nutrition, because southern Mexico is what they call a Vavilov center. I don't know if any of you heard of Vavilov or what Vavilov centers are. Vavilov was a Soviet geographer who collected 250,000 seeds over his lifetime. He probably didn't have much of a family life. He traveled all over the world, Africa, the Middle East, the Balkans, North America in the first 2 decades of the century, collecting seed, and he was able to chart the places of origin of the crops we eat. Corn is basically in southern Mexico. And no matter what you do with corn in any part of the world, you need to have some access to Mexican varieties. in order to create new ones and strengthen the ones that you need. And if there is genetic damage in the bottom of centers, it's like an error in the dictionary. People will turn to the dictionary and will read Carmulo. It's spelled Carmuli, the dictionary says so. So if there's an error, a genetic error in the bottom of centers, it will then spread out through agronomists and by people who don't know what they have in their hands. Chappelle and Quiz were subject to a slander campaign which began hours after the issue of Nature magazine was printed. Hours. I mean, it was a well-concerted campaign of slander, defamation. They even accused Chappelle of being an environmentalist. That was the most criminal allegation they could find against him. We have proof that he's a card-carrying environmentalist, so why should anybody believe him? And wow, he's a Latino also. Forget it, guilty on 2 counts, don't listen to this man. And anyway, Chappelle and Quiz were eventually vindicated beyond all doubt. Now there is no doubt in the head of any sane person that corn is testing positive all over Mexico. And we can thank the North American Free Trade Agreement for that, which turned Mexico into a corn importer. So anyway, we have more of these instances of contamination. I haven't gotten to the bad part yet. Wait, I forgot that there's one little detail. Privatization. None of this would be so bad if it weren't for the fact that all of this is private property. Every seed, every gene in those seeds is private property and is patented. Which means that a farmer who buys a bag of seed, from Monsanto has to sign an agreement not to save seed. Civilization began when we started saving seed, and that act is already becoming criminalized. You cannot save seed. You have to buy it every year. You renounce to your right to sue if there is a tragedy. But the company can sue you anytime for any kind of reason. Private detectives and lawyers can enter your farm anytime to look at what you're doing. If you're sued, you cannot tell the press or tell a neighbor. Basically a sort of agro-police state. And intellectual property, those are 2 very important words because you could even say that that's the government of the world. Intellectual property is what made that geek, Bill Gates, a billionaire. He didn't do anything, he just owned some intellectual properties that are now profitable. And the whole idea of patenting seed, they're patenting trees, herbs, types of rice, proteins, even human cells. Already it is legal to patent a person's cells against that person's consent. It is perfectly legal. The Supreme Court of California already ruled that the patent is sacred and we live in a private property free market society, so I guess pretty soon you will have to run to the patent office with your baby before baptizing him. So anyway, this has huge impacts, implications for the environment, for our health, for the sovereignty of nations, for the integrity of scientific research, for academic liberty, and many others. You have this trend in software. You wouldn't believe it, but 20 years ago, software was free. There was nothing wrong with copying a program. But Bill Gates got the laws changed for him. These laws are being applied also to pharmaceuticals. That's why many people in Africa are dying of AIDS unnecessarily because pharmaceutical companies will not give special prices to Africa. It's also spreading to books, music, and almost anything you do can be construed as piracy. If you lend somebody a book, if you download a song, it's basically the enclosure of genes of nature and knowledge and culture. So what happened to my friend Percy Schmeiser, who's here today with the protest? He's a Canadian farmer who farmed canola his whole life. Nobody ever bothered him. He used his own seed, and one day he found that his canola was back-crossed with Monsanto's genetically engineered variety. And you can't ever get rid of canola. That's impossible because it's seeding itself all of the time. You can take the pico y la hoz and plow it out and it will grow back. You can't ever get rid of it. So the work of his lifetime was, he was on the verge of retirement. He was ruined. He sent a complaint to Monsanto, which is always, denying that this type of thing happens. And Monsanto said, hey, that is true. That is our product in your property. So you are a criminal and a pirate, and you have to give us $20,000, I think, per acre, to make up for this theft of a patented product. And, Percy, un gallo de pelea, he said, that's BS. So they went to court, and in the year 2004, the Canadian Supreme Court decided that Monsanto is right, and that scientific evidence will be irrelevant in cases of genetic contamination. Anybody who is polluted must pay the company. 9 cases out of 10, the company is Monsanto. And anyway, we have this all over the United States, you know, Pinkerton detectives and lawyers going all over the countryside, you know, Nebraska, Iowa, threatening and harassing farmers, you know, accusing them of piracy and asking them to sign an exclusivity agreement and pay $20,000 or we'll see you in court. It's that type of agri-police that we're facing. And they said this technology was going to feed the hungry. That's pretty sad. And anyway,
We hope it doesn't feed them.
yeah, exactly. So that is the situation today. The good news, oh, I forgot the good news I was about to tell you. I need to tell you. There is a worldwide opposition movement. I devote a whole chapter in it called, the chapter is called Satyagraha, contra los transgénicos. Satyagraha is the spirit of struggle of Mahatma Gandhi, who fought British colonialism through peaceful civil disobedience. He didn't present any law project, he didn't lobby his representatives, he didn't do anything, he simply disobeyed the law. And the law, remember, was the British monopoly in salt. And he urged everybody to do the same. And we saw the Satyagraha in Vieques more recently, where thousands and thousands of people refused to obey the law, and it became unenforceable. This is happening all over the world right now, and this technology and the corporations behind it have been facing opposition ever since. In Latin America, the opposition is especially strong. Right now, Argentina has 14 million hectares of genetically engineered soy. I mean, they're paving the whole country with this single herbicide-intensive crop. And anyway, the resistance is all over the place. We met here this week to counter the BIO protests. And there is an agroecological revolution taking place all over the world right now. It's not noticed, it's not reported by the newspapers, it's not being spoken about by the important people. And it's manifesting itself in community gardens, home gardens, seed exchanges among farmers, CSAs, which is community supported agriculture, we see plenty of that here, farmers markets where you buy directly from the farmer, and also organic farming. In Puerto Rico, most of the top people in the government believe that organic farming is something really stupid. You know, for credit card hippies who can afford to lose a lot of money doing something that is totally useless. But the data, and I show it in one of the last chapters in the book, shows over and over again that farming without chemicals is superior to conventional agriculture economically, ecologically, socially, in every single margin. And agroecology is a revolutionary project. You know, it has a political content because people who are doing agroecology don't want an organic Walmart. They don't want Walmart, period. And the idea is to transform the system, to feed the hungry, and in the third world it's even more political because they're talking also about agrarian reform, which means giving land to the poor. That's the best way to fight poverty, give land to the poor. And also food sovereignty, which is a very important concept that I'm trying to get around in Puerto Rico. Soberanía alimentaria, which means creating a sovereign agriculture. Because if we get Puerto Rican agriculture off the ground, but we depend on seed from the United States, which ironically was created in Puerto Rico, and then we have to buy it back. If we're buying pesticides, if we're buying the antibiotics and everything, absolutely everything, you cannot call that agriculture Puerto Rican. There's nothing local about it. So I explain in the book all the fundamentals of food sovereignty and what people in the city and in the countryside and even in the third world can do about it. So I'm going to end my talk with this observation. A month or two ago, I was meeting with a friend called Nelson Alvarez. I don't know if any of you know him. He's a compatriot who studied social ecology, just like I did in Vermont. Then he went to work for an organization whose work you should be acquainted with called GRAIN, Genetic Resources Action International. They're bilingual, they have documentation in Spanish and in English, and they're very, very good people. Anyway, he moved to Uruguay, and he's a consultant on organic agriculture and all these things. In Puerto Rico, he was a pioneer of sustainable agriculture when nobody knew what the hell that was. And nobody knew, even in the independence movement, what the hell is that, another hippie thing, you know? What's this got to do with anything? Now it's becoming an in thing, and the things he wrote back in the 80s are pretty much hip, you know? But he was way ahead of his time. And we were in Rio Piedras last month, drinking coffee, and he was telling me, Carmelo, we're taking a beating. Nos están dando una pela. There's GMOs all over Argentina. They spread to Brazil, and Lula didn't do anything. Now they're spreading like gangrene into Paraguay. They're spreading into eastern Bolivia. Uruguay is not putting up any resistance. We're getting beaten, you know, all over the place. And there are a lot of strategy meetings going on in South America. And they're way ahead of us on this, you know. Here we're trying to preserve small farmers. In South America, small farmer is the most common profession. In Bolivia, most people are small farmers. So it's very easy to explain this to them. They understand and they know what their own interests are. And most people in these countries have never eaten food made by strangers. All the food they eat are done, you know, chickens or vegetables, you know, made by people they know. And that's supposed to be backward, you know, because they don't go to the supermarket. And anyway, there are these strategy meetings talking about what do we do? What the hell do we do? What trench of battle can we rally to from which we can launch our counterattack? Because all of our strategies have pretty much failed so far, because we've gone for the conventional, what do you say, el camino trillado. Just like in Vieques, we did the regular thing for 60 years and it certainly didn't work. So we're at that point, at that, you could call it the David Sanes point, when we're finally faced with the reality that our tactics and strategies are not working and we better start getting serious. And there was one person in Chile, in southern Chile, Camila Montesinos, who saw all of this coming 10 years ago. And she had warned us already by then, mira, por ahí no estás picando fuera el hoyo. You're going about it the wrong way. You're missing the whole point. If we do this way, in the year 2006, we're gonna be whining and crying on each other's shoulders. And so, of course, we turn to her. She doesn't write anything, you know, she just talks. She's part of that southern Chile oral tradition of women. So you just have to put up a microphone or something. She's really, really wise and wonderful person. I do quote her at the beginning of the book. She said 2 words, peasant strategies. That's all we need, you know, the secret is right there. And what that means, of course, that bears some explanation. In Latin America, there are millions of people who don't go to Walmart. They don't go to Pueblo supermarket. They don't depend on pharmaceutical corporations for health. They create their own food whenever they can. You know, sometimes they are displaced and landless. But those who are landless, they wouldn't want anything more than to get their own piece of land. They don't want to move to shanty towns in the city. There's millions of them. They know how to farm, they save their own seed, they don't buy seed, they don't buy fertilizer, they don't buy pesticides, they don't depend on anybody. It's all a circle, you know. They use oxen instead of tractors, which don't run on fossil fuels, but on hay, which you can get at the farm. And these are the backward people, you know, that the Yankee wants to save and turn them into civilized people and have them all, you know, with PlayStation and plasma TV sets and an SUV so that they can be happy like us. But anyway, they're very insistent on preserving their way of life. In Puerto Rico, we would call them jíbaro. In the US, would be a small farmer. And they're insisting on preserving their way of life, and they're the sector that is the best prepared to deal with this GMO threat. And anything that helps these people is actually helping us. And they have their own political projects. And even if they live in the middle of the Amazon jungle or in the Paraguayan Chaco, which white people think is the green hell, but not for the people who live there, they're perfectly happy, you know, in those really isolated places, you know, isolated, they're very much abreast of what is happening in the rest of the world. They know what the IMF is, they know what repression is, they know what third world debt is, the IMF, neoliberalism, they know the deal. They're educated and they could teach us a few things. And they're demanding agrarian reform. Only Hugo Chavez is doing it in Latin America right now. Sorry for Lula. And food sovereignty. And of course the cancellation of third world debt. Because all of these issues tie also into genetic engineering. It's not an isolated issue. If you see it as an isolated issue, we're going to lose. So right now I'm trying to propose to the independence movement a proposal for an agricultura soberana, which means not only agriculture, but an agriculture made by and for Puerto Ricans, not by pencil-neck geeks from, some other country telling us how to do things, and an agriculture that will be not for export. Actually, maybe the sequel to the book. Within a few months, I will have worked out the translation, but like I said, there is a summary available in English already. And I got a few copies available. When I come home, I still have a few cases, and I'll send them to our compañeros prisioneros. So I'm really honored to be here. This is a place that I had only heard about and read about a lot, la Escuela Roberto Clemente, el Centro Cultural Paseo Boricua, and all of those things. And well, anyway, now I'm right here, the real thing. So thank you very much, and questions and answers, I'll be happy to share here with you.
And anybody that has any question,